Hi, everyone. Welcome to NYPCC's Roundtable discussion. We're so excited to have you all join us tonight. My name is Shawnee Mohan. I'm the Senior Talent Acquisition Coordinator here at NYPCC. For those of you who have just joined us, we did put a link in the chat box. If you can kindly fill it out with your information to sign in your attendance, that would be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, we do want to get this discussion started. Again, we're very thrilled to have you all join us tonight. Our roundtable discussion for the spring is thriving as a new mental health therapist in a post-pandemic world. We have NYPCC's very own clinicians weighing in on this topic. And I know there's a lot of new grads joining us this evening for this event, so we hope that you do find tonight's discussion insightful. The first person I would like to introduce you all to is our roundtable moderator for this evening. Tatiana Panillo is our licensed mental health counselor who joined NYPCC as an intern. That's right, Tatiana started her career here at NYPCC and has evolved in many different roles since the beginning. She is an alumni of Queens College's mental health counseling program and earned a postgraduate certification from NYU, as well as her national board certification. Currently, Tatiana is our East New York Clinic's program administrator, where she oversees the day-to-day clinical operations. Tatiana works tirelessly and passionately to ensure that top quality mental health care continues to be accessible to NYPCC's multicultural clients. So everyone, let's welcome Tatiana.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today on our wonderful roundtable. We have an amazing discussion with such a wonderful panel that I'm excited to introduce you. So without further ado, our first panelist is Michael Sanchez. Michael is a licensed mental health counselor. He is also a clinical supervisor and has been with the agency since 2014. Michael works out of our Bushwick location, which is one of the other Brooklyn locations here that we serve our population. Second up is Perrin Felder. Perrin is also a licensed mental health counselor. He has also been with the agency since 2014, and he is directly working from our Bronx location. So we're very excited. Last, but certainly not least, is Alejandra Zuniga, who's a social worker that started with us in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Alejandro is also working from our Bronx location. So welcome. I'm very excited to have you all as panelists, and we're excited to start our roundtable discussion on such an important event. And so the pandemic brought a lot of uncertainty to the world. And even in the midst of all of it, healthcare workers rose to the occasion. And though a lot of focus was on medical professionals, some say that mental health therapists will be on the emotional front line for years post the pandemic. So with that being said, I want to direct our first question to you, Michael. What are your thoughts on mental health clinicians as frontline responders?
First and foremost, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Tatiana, for that warm welcome and introduction, as well as thank you very much, New York Psychotherapy and Counseling Center, for allowing me the opportunity to partake in this evening's discussion, which is hopefully going to be extremely motivating and informative. You know, I think when you use the word uncertainty, it hits home because it does bring us back to March 13th, 2020, when the president announced a national emergency. Days to follow, by March 16th, that Monday, I'm sure all of you can recall, everything starts shutting down. Some of us believed that things were going to last for maybe a week or two, but then we started seeing the rise in COVID numbers, leading to a variety of other complications. And so when we think about first line responders during that time period, it's easy to assume that what we're describing and talking about are medical professionals that were providing medical care. And that's very accurate, actually. However, the influx of the pandemic brought upon a variety of other issues. Individuals who had achieved a certain level of psychiatric stability now found themselves without services. And then, of course, the anxiety-provoking state worldwide started to increase the need for the work that we do as clinicians. And so when we view things from that perspective, I think it's safe to say that we too, as mental health professionals, play a very essential role as frontline workers.
Absolutely, Michael. Yes. And I definitely think, as a frontline worker, maybe there was more focus on the nurses and the doctors, and we do appreciate those healthcare workers, but we were also doing that work on the back end, maybe not so obvious to others, but this is why we wanted to have an amazing discussion today on the importance of ourselves and in our field. So I'm curious specifically, I want to direct the attention to Alejandro, who is from class of 2020, who started with us. How did it look like for you, Alejandro, to adapt as a clinician throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I definitely had a kind of a more unique experience because I started graduate school in the fall of 2020, right smack in the middle of the pandemic, right, of the uncertainty of, of a lot of these really difficult things. So adaptability was kind of like, I felt like it should have been a class in graduate school, right? Because we were just continuously trying to learn how to adapt to a multiplicity of different things. But, like on the basic level, just like the school setting, right? Which I expected to attend graduate school in person, right? To work with peers and professors in person. And that kind of didn't happen. It all switched to virtual. So that was very intimidating. And the uncertainty, we talk a lot about like the anxiety and all of these, these things that our patients go through, but as clinicians, we go through them as well. And me, especially as a student, right, at the beginning of my career, it was what's it called? It was very intimidating and difficult, but I think that it encouraged a sense of proactivity, right? That which I saw through my professors and also through therapists and clinicians here and all of our employees here at New York Psychotherapy, right? Like that proactivity to adapt and do the best that we could in that situation, right? So yeah, but it was difficult, but it also was an exciting opportunity as well,
I agree. Thanks, Alejandro. I think that's very important to share, and I'm sure a lot of our audience members kind of resonate with that as well. Michael, what about you? You started pre-COVID.
Yeah, what's interesting about the times that we're living in now is that we've really normalized this telemental health platform. And prior to 2020, March of 2020, telemental health wasn't really a thing in New York City.
No.
Specifically, right? Because we're all working out in New York. And so I think during that time, the first thing that came to mind was, well, what now? What do we do now? How do we reach the community? How do we reach our clients? How do we resume and maintain the work that we're doing with our clients? We were fortunate enough that NYPCC took the lead with establishing a HIPAA compliant platform that would allow us to continue the work that we were doing. But I think initially that was the big concern was, well, what do we do now? And when will I see some of my clients? I recall walking some of my clients out, and that one last session, and I didn't see them in person for maybe 2-3 years later, right? And so it was just a different time that we were living in with so many uncertainties. But fortunately enough, we were provided with a platform that was going to give us the opportunity and the potential to adapt to this new normal.
Yeah, thank you. Perrin, how was it for you to adapt?
I mean, when we think of the word adapt, we think of like, how is therapy going to look, after or post-pandemic? How am I going to still be able to render the service that I've been trained clinically to do in a different platform? And it's just about honing in on the skills that we've had in face-to-face therapy and sort of implementing them or finding a creative way to implement them in a virtual world. And just realizing, meeting the client where they are, understanding our personal biases when it comes to the post-pandemic world, but also taking in a greater consideration for their issues and difficulty with assessing things post-pandemic. So it's just a realization and an understanding of where each other and where the clients are, and being able to just meet them where they are.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, definitely. And it was interesting in graduate school too, because like there's this gradual kind of like realization that that the context within therapy and just clinical services are changing, right, with the implementation of BetterHelp and all these apps. I did a lot of podcasting during the pandemic as well, right, and all the ads were for things like Headspace, like BetterHelp, right? So the context of clinical work continuously change, and it's it's interesting to adapt to that as well in the field in general.
Yeah, I know. I don't think anybody knew about I didn't know about BetterHelp before Now it's like everywhere, right? You see it on the subway. Perrin, you brought up a really interesting and really important topic in our field specifically. It's that connection with clients. And I know back to 2020, like Michael was saying, like the world shut down. I remember also walking those clients and like, am I ever going to see them? What are we going to do? Do we have any work? So like Michael had pointed out, just the quick ability to just transition those clients virtually. But now, how was it for you, Perrin, to connect with those clients on a virtual level?
Um, with the clients that I had pre-pandemic, it was pretty easy. All we did was, talk about or catch up on how our lives have changed drastically because of the pandemic. But the clients post-pandemic, it was kind of difficult because it's very hard to engage someone. When we are therapists, we're trained with all these clinical interventions, body language, body gesturing, but it's very difficult to do that over a screen, especially when there's so many different things going on the outside world. So it was just about the engagement, just about keeping the client at the forefront of therapy. It's very difficult to get lost, I say in therapy, lost in the sauce in regards to everything that's happening with the pandemic, the issues, the body count that rose, the inflation and everything. But it's very, very important to help the client understand that even though that we're in this post-pandemic reality, I'm still here with you. I'm still the same person that I was when we were face to face. The new clients, it's a little bit easier because all they know is me over camera. But my face clients, it was kind of difficult in the beginning, but they're striving and thriving tremendously, especially when they know that they have a therapist that's with them and engaged with them throughout this process.
Great. Michael, you said you were walking your clients literally out of the building, right? So how was it for you? How did you connect with them virtually?
I would say that it was a little bit challenging in the beginning. I think that, as Perrin just mentioned, I think the clients that were already used to this platform and already invested and involved in the work that we were doing, they probably transitioned with more ease.
Yeah.
Whereas, some of the newer clients were probably struggling with catching their footing. And some of the new clients as well had never been in therapy. And so, it's understandable why they would struggle with adapting to this virtual world and never having been in therapy. In our discussions, Alejandro had coined the term, the casual client. And it's something that we did kind of struggle with adapting to and transitioning to the work that we're doing remotely, right? So Alejandro, why don't you let everybody know what the casual client is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, it was different, right? Because when I started my internship in clinically with the agency in 2021, all I knew was virtual interactions because the world was very much still virtual, right? I joked around with my younger clients that I'm just like, kind of like this floating head in space that you can talk to about your feelings, right? And all of a sudden, we started having sessions in person again. Right. But before that, right, definitely the casual client, people coming in, new clients that weren't, that were new to therapy, the virtual world allowed them to come into sessions and they would be cooking or folding their clothes, right? Or they were kind of like watching TV in the corner, even though they were telling me they weren't, you know what I mean? Which was, interesting, these interesting boundaries that were necessary to set at the beginning of a clinical relationship with your client, right? That I was just introduced to immediately through video sessions, so it still is a challenge, if I'm being honest, right? It's still definitely a challenge. But it also presented an opportunity to, develop these new skills that didn't exist before, but nevertheless highlight, the importance of the work that we do, right? And those pre-existing skills that we already need to develop and continue to develop them as much as we could,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so that in itself was the bigger challenge, I would say, when transitioning to the work that we do virtually, because that is somewhat of a lot of pressure for us as clinicians, because the reality is that we're setting the air in the session, right? We're establishing the platform that's going to create engagement. And so then that requires us to self-reflect and ask ourselves the difficult questions like, how do I create excitement? How do I create investment into the work that we're doing? And how do I replicate what was occurring in my office now virtually? And so those were some of the challenges that we were facing as we transition into telemental health work. I do agree, and I think that these days our clients are more familiar with what remote services look like, and so it's a lot easier to get them involved and get them invested.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to whip out the virtual Uno, virtual Jenga, all that good stuff. You got to have it in your toolbox.
Yeah, I never realized how many resources there were for that. But sometimes use it when I'm not working with clients. It's kind of fun.
It is. Alejandro, how was it when you finally, things started to trickle back in, our clients started to come in person, and you saw those clients that whether you opened those cases during COVID, and when you saw those clients for the first time face to face, I'm curious, how was it for you?
Yeah, no, it was honestly a little intimidating, right? Because I only knew clients working, through a virtual setting. And although I feel like I did pretty well in the beginning in setting those boundaries with clients in a virtual setting, I didn't know what it would be to work with them in person, even though ironically, before the pandemic, that's what therapy just looked like to me. Like the room with a therapist and their client kind of like seemed like a sanctuary. It was like a sanctuary that I never had like really worked in before. So it was intimidating. And when clients came in, it was really interesting to see just the contrast, right? I mean, what's it called? Both in positive and negative ways, right? Of interacting and working with a client in person, right? But it was also, again, very exciting to have that contrast, right? And continue to develop skills from it, right? With a client will sometimes work very differently when they're in a virtual setting, and then very differently in an in-person setting, right? So it was, intimidating, but also exciting to do at the same time.
Right. Perrin, what about you? How was it seeing your clients in person?
I just was about to chime in. Whereas Alejandro may have gotten the intimidating aspect from face to face, I got the intimidating perspective from video. It's like, okay, I'm a people's person. Look, I sit down, I talk to you, we vibe, we jive, we talk about different things, and I watch your body language, and I just give you a couple words, and you're on your way. But what do you do when you're battling with the TV? You're battling with the kids. You're battling with the dinner that's on the stove that may be burning. And you're like, okay, I have to keep you engaged. I have to keep you focused. And I also have to keep you mindful of what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring you to psychological and emotional wellness. And I have to compete with many different things. So for me, it was very intimidating. How am I going to really be able to engage these clients over the video? So I had to be very creative, like Alejandro said, break out the icebreakers, the Uno, the this and that, talking to kids and being on their level as far as how to engage them and keep their attention. It's quite easy, in my perspective, to engage an adult. But when you have a 5-year-old that wants to play with their truck, how do you engage them? And most importantly, how do you keep their engagement? So I found myself having to break out the books and go back and forth into trial and error over video, which is not easy. So, but as far as the face-to-face clients, I mean, it's just like, we're just catching up on old news. So it's definitely been an adaptation for me, but one that I definitely appreciate. Definitely.
Yeah, the trial or error thing I think is so important to keep in mind, because like some things do work and it feels very good when they do, but when they don't, you know what I mean? It is frustrating as a clinician, right? Especially with like those younger clients. But it's a process of understanding, at least me, that I'm in the beginning of my career, learning that, it's almost necessary for things not to work sometimes, right? Because it offers an opportunity for us to continue to try new things, right? And be proactive.
Absolutely.
And we do have to give a shout out to our clients, right? Who really also made the effort to adapt to these big changes that we were going through. And so some of them, like, as you guys are mentioning, some of the interventions that we were using, or maybe the different, methods that we bring into the table to facilitate engagement, maybe we had to make some modifications to that. But a lot of clients were extremely open and very receptive to that level of change as well. I'd like to add too that it was quite nerve-wracking, I think, for our clients and for us as well, to have our clients come back into the building, right? But it was so fruitful. It was really fulfilling and very exciting to see that. And even, I would say, up until like maybe a couple of weeks ago, when we eliminated the masks, right? We were able to now see our clients smile in person. Some of the younger clients that I was working with, in 2019 and early 2020 are now taller than I am, you know?
Mhm.
It's exciting to see all of these changes occur, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interject. I gotta really piggyback off of Michael's comment. We do need to just give a standing ovation to our clients who are able to adapt with us as well. There was this technique that I particularly used with a client, and I'm quite sure all of my other colleagues are familiar with the empty chair technique. And I would do it often in session. And then it was one of my favorite techniques with this specific client. And the client would always say, well, how are we going to do the empty chair? Like, what are we going to do? I'm not there anymore. And I would tell him, I would say, listen, okay, I would get a chair and I will stand up with him. And I would tell him to put the chair in the middle of the floor. And he would put the chair in the middle of the floor. And I would tell him, get another chair and put a smiley face on it. And I would guide him through how to do the interaction and intervention himself. So it was not only helpful, but it was always psycho education for him as well. So Mike, I had to say that because they adapt with us as well.
I agree. And I think the ability for our clients to have that accessibility. So, we all live in New York, right? So when there's a blizzard, just being able to hop on that video session, it's better than just not seeing them at all. So I do think there's that ability to still connect and meet our clients virtually, which is really important in our field. And I just want to switch gears a little bit. So, for the new therapist, right? What are some things I guess you would recommend to look out for in trainings? What are some trainings that either you've received or some trainings that you would recommend to help you grow your skill set during the pandemic, post-pandemic? What are some things? If anyone wants to jump in there.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective of coming into the field for the first time, right? Or at least there's this, idea, at least for me personally, that like I was going to leave graduate school and 100% know what I'm going, really feel confident in working clinically. And really, that's, I realized that wasn't really true, right? And that, again, that can be intimidating. So the idea of trainings in a workplace environment, right? In any environment that you're working in I think is super important, right? And here specifically on neuropsychotherapy, right? Having trainers on rapport building, engagement, these types of things now in different contexts, both in the context of, clinical and in person, right? I thought were very useful, right? And, because, you think about something like CBT, right? And CBT, at least in the literature, has always been, established through the context of working with a person, in person with face-to-face, and that kind of changes, right? So the application or, the ability to have those trainings in your place environment is important. And it's also too important to understand that, my skills will continue to develop as you gain more clinical experience, as you meet different clients, right, that need different things. And so those trainings are very important and very cool to have as well.
Agree. Michael, anything?
Yeah, the part of the work that we do that we're not compensated for is that as therapists, we actively have to reflect on the work that we're doing. And the reason why we do that is because we want to be able to identify any weaknesses and any strengths that we're bringing to the table in the work that we're doing. And the challenge with that is that really post-graduation, the overall idea is that now we have to take information that was in the textbook, and we need to take that textbook knowledge and manifest it into real life work with our clients. And that in itself can be a challenge. And so we've been fortunate enough here at NYPCC where we have a variety of different trainings that does help us prepare to transition from that textbook knowledge into real life work with our clients. I've also been very fortunate, and you can relate to this as well, Tatiana, that as a supervisor, we not only receive active guidance, but we also attend trainings ourselves that are tailored towards helping us improve our skill set as supervisors, so that we can actively help our supervisees, contribute to their own professional development. And so I believe it was Alejandro that just mentioned, I do encourage everyone to, when you are out there, especially postgraduates or people that are getting ready to graduate, congratulations to you all, by the way, that you take into consideration, that professional development is something that doesn't stop when you graduate. As a matter of fact, that's the moment when you really get to contribute into yourself, right? And so because of that, it's okay to ask some of those difficult questions, right? So if you're applying for a new job somewhere, or if you're looking to work at a particular agency or a particular setting, it's all right to ask those questions. How will this setting, how will this agency, how will this environment continue to contribute to my own professional development and to my skill set, right? So that I can be effective at the work that I'm doing. And in my experience, when we're effective at the work that we're doing, that's where the real fulfillment comes in.
You brought up a great point, Michael, is just interviewing, right? These nerve-wracking interviews, but just being open to say, hey, what are some of the trainings that the agency offers? Do I have to pay out of pocket for them? Are they during work hours? Do I have to travel? Do you offer virtual therapy? I'm sorry, virtual trainings, right? And so, Perrin, what about you? Any particular training that you like? Anything that you recommend?
As far as the trainings for me, what I love when you just said about the whole paying and stuff. I mean, everyone is thinking, okay, how am I going to fit this in my schedule? Am I going to have to see clients during this time? Am I going to have to pay for this? And one thing I love about it is that anywhere you go, you're going to have to, or most places, you're going to have to do some type of payment for training it, whereas the company, provides certain trainings for us. And what I love about the trainings here is that they're very relative and up to date. We understand that as clinicians, we grow daily. Even I believe when we get our licensure, we have to take CEU credits to keep it active. And it's because it prevents us from getting dull. It keeps us sharpened. And especially in a post-pandemic world, CBT, REBT, those things don't look the same now. We have to make the adaptability for the client relative to what they're going through. I mean, we learn textbook CBT and how to implement it, but how does CBT look now, post-pandemic? How do we take the interventions that we learned in school and we make them relative to the clients now? But the trainings that NYPCC provide keeps us up to date, keeps us sharpened. And I've been through a couple of them. They all, for me, scale the same. I mean, they're very informative, very in-depth. They are very proactive as well, and it keeps me on my toes as far as not only the new interventions, but how also to implement them in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, you brought up those C credits, and I
Yeah.
almost forgot about them. I know, as if getting your master's wasn't enough, right? Now you got to continue.
Yeah. Right.
I know. But you're right, Perrin. I think it's important that when you do interviews, asking those perspectives, like, do you offer these credits? Are they CE? Can you get them? Because those, I believe it's, 36 credits we have to do?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot. And so I get all of mine at NYPCC.
All right.
Yes, they're right there. They're easy and they're included. So why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Any other suggestions on like what to look out for when you are interviewing for a position as a therapist?
Yeah, I think when I interviewed for neuropsychotherapy, right, or in general, go and interview for this profession in general, right, it's looking to also the message and direction of the place that that you're anticipating to work in, right? The context of the work that you're doing, the population that you will be working with, which I think here in neuropsychotherapy has been great because we have such a wide spectrum of patients, right, of different ages and different backgrounds, which I think makes us stronger clinicians, right, to just the whole experience. But just bring questions, you know what I mean? Just bring questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Be unapologetic about it, because I can guarantee that the recruiters will be happy that you are asking questions, right?
Agree. In fact, when you don't ask questions, I don't know. When you don't ask questions, I'm like, are you sure you don't have any questions? I don't know. Michael, you're laughing. You agree?
I do agree. And I think it's so important to ask questions these days, right? And let's be realistic, guys. There's a very high need for the work that we do. And so it's okay for us to shop around when it comes to looking for employment. And one of the things that we want to take into consideration is the fact that we're also human. A lot of people, sometimes they view therapists as individuals or individuals in the helping profession. Maybe, we're just in the corner, Francois, candles, meditating. But we're humans going through life just like everybody else. And so it's important to ask some questions. Will this new environment, this employment, will it provide me with mental health days, a day where I can really regroup and recuperate emotionally, right? Physically. What else is being offered? Here at NYPCC, we also have the EAP program, right, which offers services, psychotherapy services for not only its employees, but their families as well. And so those are things that we need to take into consideration, because we are living in challenging times, and we want to be in an environment and in a setting that's going to actively promote our own personal growth and our own personal development and our own mental health as well. And so I strongly encourage everybody out there in the audience, shop around, and as a matter of fact, sit down with one of our HR, individuals and ask questions as well. Inform yourselves on the opportunities that are out there, especially if you are at that post-graduation mark.
Agree. Yeah. Yeah. What about, I guess, just changing a little bit on how you touched a really important topic, Michael, about feeling supported in that journey through the pandemic. I know you've been with us for a long time, and you've seen yourself, you've evolved as well as the agency. And I do think the agency does a phenomenal job at really advocating for the employees and just meeting our needs, throughout such a difficult time throughout the years. But, Alejandra, I want to again turn it over to you about, you came in during COVID. What is something that how have you felt supported through your journey in navigating the pandemic?
Well, yeah, I see, and this is part of the reasons why I love working here so much, right? Is that support of again, that understanding that you're coming into the field and you want to continue to learn and to improve our skills. I felt like that was an understanding coming into the field in general, but also here in your psychotherapy, where it's understanding that there was a confidence in the skills that I did bring to the table, right? And the clinical confidence that I was trying to produce, but this was understanding that there's so much more to learn, right? And there's so many resources here to allow you, right, to continue to learn, and understanding that you will continue to learn. And I think that boost of confidence is very important, especially at the at the beginning of our careers, right? Because there is a lot of intimidation and anxiety surrounding it, right? And then all the other logistical things, like Michael mentioned, the mental health days, right? But also like coming out of graduate school, like the student loans, right? The student loan payment program that exists here at the clinic, to like super useful resources, to kind of like eliminate some of those other stresses that exist, right? Just coming out of graduate school, and address those as much as you can, and then also provide that emotional, right, and confidence, confidence type support, right, that is important for clinicians to feel good about what we're doing and feel confident in what we're doing.
Gross student loans, right? Good thing you're reaping the rewards of that. What about
definitely.
you, Karen? Yep. Or Michael, what do you think about, what been some ways that you've felt supported through your journey here?
I have felt extremely supported. I feel very lucky. I play multiple roles in the field, and I've been supported along the way, whether I've needed time or to teach outside of NYPCC, or in the times that I've struggled personally when it comes to the challenging aspects of the work that we do. I have a great supervisor. I have somebody that I can talk to. I've built amazing relationships with our colleagues, and I've felt supported all the way. I think that it is important to work in an environment that's going to actively, again, promote our own well-being, our own mental health, and our own professional development too, right? Because that we want to feel confident, we want to feel good about what our work looks like day in and day out, And I think with the work that we do, because we are allocated so many opportunities, not only to see clients within our agency, but to focus on also working on our private practice, or maybe diving into different areas of the field, right? We want to have that extra support, and we want to be in a setting and an environment that's actively contributing to our professional development. You and I started off here together, Tatiana. We were both interns, right? And we've had the amazing opportunity to grow professionally here, and to be able to share some of that growth with now our supervisees as well, and that really is an amazing experience. And that's something to feel grateful for, not just for the environment that I work in, but just being part of this field, period,
Agree. Experience, right, throughout the years, and just giving back to new hires, right, to supervisees who come into the field, and may feel that anxiety of like, what am I doing here, right? How do I navigate there? But this isn't textbook. So thank you for sharing that, Michael. And then Perrin, what are your thoughts on how you felt supported through your journey here?
If anyone is like me, I'll ask the question, Michael and Alejandro. It seemed to me that in the beginning, it seemed like everything was accelerated. It seemed like when the pre-pandemic and everything started, everything became an issue as opposed to what to do. There was so many compliance issues of what do we do? How do we continue to engage our clients? What are the HIPAA restrictions? It made you even want to just see, hey, what can I do? Walking on eggshells. And one of the things that has helped me exponentially was supervision, and that I can't. What would I do without it? I broke it up in 3 categories, and I'm going to just mention this quickly. With supervision, it heightened me professionally in that it kept me grounded and updated with all the new crisis interventions and how to go about utilizing the interventions that we learned in school and implementing them in a post-pandemic world. How did it look? And supervising has definitely helped me in that. And I guess implementing it appropriately. They also helped personally in keeping me grounded as far as my own personal biases. Sometimes when we hear about our clients' day-to-day issues, we can become biased as opposed to, okay, there's so much going on in the world. There's people dying, there's people getting sick, and you're talking about this, you're talking about that. So the supervisory proponent has helped me to stay grounded, to stay and understand and be empathetic and show that unconditional positive regard with my clients. And also the last thing, it has definitely helped me in an administrative perspective, and that is keeping me on track with treatment plans. It's keeping me on track with notes and stuff. Sometimes it's very, very easy with the influx of new clients and different things that are happening post-pandemic and what the world is going to look like moving forward. It's very easy to get lost in just work and just the overhead and making sure you meet all your deadlines. And one thing I love about supervision is it holds me accountable. It sends me those little tracking things. Say, Perrin, you got this done, you got that due. So it's definitely, I'm telling you, if we didn't have supervision, I would literally be running around like a chicken with the head off. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think supervision is really, and when in doubt, just going to your supervisor.
Yes.
We don't all have the answers, even as supervisors, right, Michael? Sometimes we don't know the answers, and it's just sharing with our colleagues, following up, even when you had that really difficult session and you need to almost just like vent and get it off your chest. It's hard work. It is rewarding being a therapist, but just being able to share that, and so you're not sitting with it on your own. Since we've talking about the pandemic, right, I also want to shed to the importance that it was a dark time for not just all of us, but for all of humanity. And now that we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, now that the masks are off, what are some positives that you can take from this experience as a therapist? So I want to start with you, Alejandro.
Yeah, no, definitely. For me, it is that, that sense of, like I mentioned it before, the realization of the importance of being proactive, right? Like, it was a very difficult time. It's undeniable. A lot of people were going through a lot of like significant traumas and tragedies, with everything that was going on, right? And then, in a clinical space, there are a lot of boundaries and challenges with, again, having to adapt so drastically to this new setting, right? And also continuously try to help clients as much as we can, while balancing your own anxieties about what was going on too, right? But inside of that, I think the skills that were needed to get through those moments, the accessibility of help, either through supervision, through resources, an agency like New York's neuropsychotherapy, right, highlighted the importance of, to me, being a proactive practitioner, right? And these skills and these experiences will be, I think, can definitely be carried on, hopefully throughout my career, and continue to be, amplified with the help of knowledgeable, right, and very proficient supervisors and experienced clinicians like yourselves, right? I feel very honored to be amongst this group of clinicians, right? But yeah, I think, through all that difficulty, right, I think clinicians came out more resilient, right? More resilient than they were before.
Yeah, Alejandro, I know I speak for Michael and Perrin when I tell you that when I hear you, it sounds like we're speaking to, or I'm speaking to just someone who's been in the field for years. So I think the pandemic looks good on you. I think you definitely sharpened those skills. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, Perrin, what about you? How has the pandemic helped shape you?
You said it best, Tatiana, when you brought in this topic. You used the word darkness. I remember when I first found out that there was a such thing back in 2020, it was called Corona at first. So I got it mixed up with something else that I'm not going to mention, but I didn't know what exactly it was until I brought my client down that day and I saw everyone in their masks and zipped all the way up. And we're in the middle of March. So basically it's springtime and like the people's coats are all over their face. And I'm just like, what do we do? What does therapy look like? And then when it first started, they were calling us essential workers. And I'm like literally saying, how am I going to transition from something that I was trained in a class to do to do it over the phone and over the waves of the internet, where there's so many interruptions that could happen? And one of the things that I've learned and the positivity in this is, like Alejandro said, resiliency. Challenging myself to adapt in a way that is different. It grew me not only professionally, but personally as well. Also, being able, I mentioned before, I call it code switching. Okay, so I'm in mode in therapy on Monday and Sunday in person, but throughout the week, I'm over video. So I have to be able to hone those skills, not only to interact personally, but also virtually. So the positive that I got from the pandemic is being able to do just that. Now I don't feel that I'm in a dark place when it comes to therapy. Now I feel that therapy can still thrive and even transcend beyond this because of all the things that have been afforded to us from the agency that we work for. So the positivity for this, for me, is just being able to not only thrive personally, but also virtually.
Amazing. I know your clients are very lucky to have you, Perrin, as a therapist. Great. Keep up the great work that you're doing. And last, but certainly not least, Michael, how has the pandemic helped shape you as a clinician?
I think the pandemic has definitely helped create a greater sense of excitement for the work that we do. And the reason for that is because you use the term dark times, and it really has been dark times. The last 3 years have been extremely overwhelming and challenging, not only nationwide, but worldwide. And so when you think about the light of the end of the tunnel, as you mentioned, this idea of there being some stability with the pandemic, I can't help but also think about the other light of the end of the tunnel that's addressing the aftermath and the residual impact of the pandemic. There's still a variety of individuals that lost loved ones and are suffering and struggling with feelings of grief. There still are many individuals who continue to struggle with exasperated symptoms of depression brought upon by the pandemic, as well as anxiety and other mental health related issues. And so the bigger light at the end of the tunnel for me is always the ability to really reach the community, right, at a larger scale. The work that we do now is easily accessible, right, because we are able to see clients both remotely and in person. And so I find a lot of fulfillment and a lot of excitement to be able to contribute to that process, to be able to embark on this journey with our clients and help them face some of these difficult times that they've experienced and maybe continue to experience.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, definitely wise words from a very wise clinician. And I want to thank the three of you for just sharing your experience. I know it hasn't been easy for all of us, but I do think that the agency has provided us with the tools and the support that we've needed to continue to meet the demands of mental health. And for all the audience out there, if you ever doubted whether it's important to be a mental health therapist, it is definitely important. It is rewarding, it's hard work, but it's definitely something that you're going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I want to thank my amazing colleagues for sharing their experience and their wisdom and their life experience when they are doing therapy with their clients. So I want to take a moment now to the audience. I know there's a lot of people that have questions and we want to make sure we have time to answer them. So Shani, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yes, so we did get a lot of questions that came in from the chat. I also want to invite anyone that wants to go ahead and maybe unmute themselves and ask their questions as well directly to the panelists. But if we don't have anyone that wants to do that, which is perfectly fine, I can go ahead and start off with some questions in the chat. And I'm sorry if we do not get a chance to get to your question. We are running a little short on time, so I'll do my best to try to get to all of the questions. But I will also include our email address. So any questions that we didn't get to, feel free to shoot us over an email and we'll be able to connect you with one of our staff members. Yes, so I have someone who has their hand raised.
Hi, I had a question. Sorry, I had a question. You worked primarily during the pandemic. What were some of the main strategies that helped you develop those client relationships over Zoom? Like there's a lot of remote work I see coming up nowadays. You mentioned Better Health, that are completely remote. So for positions like that, what are some good strategies?
Jump in.
Am I gonna, Perrin, you wanna go ahead?
Yes, to answer that, engagement, building therapeutic rapport, meeting the client on their level. It's very difficult to try to throw all this psychological jargon that the client probably will not understand because they have not been clinically trained and to do so. So it's about just staying in the moment, being mindful of the situation that they're going through, being mindful of your personal abilities to help them, and just staying in the moment, building therapeutic rapport. Eye contact is very, very important. When you're engaging a client over the video, it's so many distractions. If a light blinks to the left or the right, you're looking, but it's very important to engage them and letting them know that you're there in the moment, keeping that eye contact, keeping that engagement, keeping that unconditional positive regard, keeping that welfare for them to let them know that, hey, listen, I know you're going through this, but now you have someone walking alongside you that will guide you to the best of their ability.
I'd also like to add the importance of a skill that we don't necessarily use in therapy, but we should be all using as therapists, which is the importance of actively engaging in self-care, so that you can be one with yourself. And the reason why that's extremely important is because you will inevitably bring that energy into your session.
Absolutely.
And so while we no longer have these mannerisms and we're not face to face with our client, if you can create positive energy, if you can create and you come in with that level of excitement and that level of commitment into the work that you're doing, then your client's going to want to be a part of that. They're going to want to embark on that journey because they're going to feel excited about embarking on that journey. And that does require us to regularly check in with ourselves and make sure that we are one with ourselves and that we are actively taking care of ourselves so that our work is in fact effective.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. I think that's really important, and also like in the sense of like rapport building, which is essential also in virtual as much as it is in person. Right. To me, one of the things I like to do is developing a sense of autonomy when the client comes into a session. Right. I always start with like they have an intake, they answer a bunch of questions before they even see their therapist. Right. And I always say it was like it's good that we have that intake, we have that initial sense of information, but I want to hear your issues from from your point of view, from with your language first, so that they feel like the space belongs to them because it legitimately does, right? And that rapport building is useful again in person and in a virtual setting, and very useful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Great, awesome. Thank you all so much, and thank you so much for asking your question. I'm gonna go ahead and dip into the chat. So someone wants to know, how do we encourage people who experience mental health issues to seek professional help because they hyper-focus into physical health due to COVID-19 and ignore their mental health?
Mm. Mm.
Normalization of coming into therapy, I think, is really important, especially in some of the populations that we work with, right? The normalization of like, you coming into therapy doesn't necessarily mean that there's, that there's like people use the word crazy, right? Like I'm crazy. Like, no, sometimes it's just nice to have someone to talk to, normalize it into their everyday experiences, and right, try to encourage them to feel good about them coming in, right? And again, giving them the sense of autonomy.
Mm-hmm. And piggyback off of Alejandra, that's exactly what we have to try to do, to depict and deactivate the stigma in therapy. I have a lot of clients that actually intertwine therapy with mentorship. And at one point I would say, no, it's therapy, but then they can be interchangeable in a sense of bringing that awareness that therapy does not mean that you have some type of dysfunction, but it's sometimes we go through stressful things, and it's very important just to take that moment to reflect and focus. And then I'm also going to piggyback off of what Michael said as far as self-care. We can definitely implement the use of therapy and self-care. Okay, we're running our bodies physically. We're getting hurt. We're getting, we're losing loved ones. There's a lot of things happening to our body physically, but the self-care of the mind is checking in to get that insight that something may be wrong. And that's how you can sort of segue them into, adopting the idea of going for mental health services.
And just speaking to my young therapists out in the audience, it's a normal characteristic for a client to come to therapy and not be 100% aware of some of the issues that they're experiencing.
Yes.
Right. And so when we do see the desire to be present, don't overwhelm yourself with, right away having the client identify every single problem that they're experiencing. Let's celebrate the fact that they're there. And let's allow the work to grow gradually, that allow the client to go at their own pace, be very supportive, be very empathetic. And again, I love the idea of normalizing. I mean, being part of the Latin community, for many years, anything having to do with psychology or psychotherapy or therapy in general is very taboo, right? So it's important to normalize the fact that you don't have to have a severe mental illness to go in to talk to somebody and to work on your own personal growth, or to maybe address certain issues that you've gone through in your life that you never really took the time to sit down and process. And so there's so many facets to the work that we're doing. It's not, and I think sometimes there's this misunderstanding that we're only working with individuals that have severe mental illness, which these days is so far from the truth, because everybody that wants to improve themselves is coming to therapy, right? Even if they just want to grow as an individual. And so it's okay to normalize that.
Definitely.
All right, guys, awesome. Probably have room for maybe one more question, which is really hard to pick because we have a lot more questions that came in. But someone wanted to know, as clinicians, we want to maintain our own level of well-being. What are some of the best ways to access supervision when it's not readily available?
I can speak on that. I think it's important that when you don't have a supervisor and you are in this field, to seek that out. I think it's essential. It goes hand in hand with doing the work. Even myself, I have someone who I can follow up on cases. I mean, there's a lot of stigma around mental health. And so some of them may be easier cases and some of them may be more higher risk. And I think you need that support when you are making that, especially when you're new in this field. I think you want to just, like Michael had said, you want to just go in there and you're excited and you're like, yes, I'm going to help this client with their depression. It's a little bit more than that. It's not just about, exploring those triggers and helping them. And so if you don't have that support, especially from a supervisor who is licensed and experienced in the field, you may actually be doing some disservice. So I highly recommend that if you don't have a supervisor, to seek out. I know there are agencies that provide them. You may have to, pay out of pocket. However, there's a lot of places that they do offer that with employment. And so it's important that when you are interviewing, you are asking them, am I getting supervision? What is the frequency of supervision? What does supervision look like? Do I have to pay out of pocket? And so these are important questions to ask when you are seeking supervision, whether it's with an employer or outside.
If I can also just add, supervision is not just about clocking in those hours that we need to earn our license. As a matter of fact, seeking out guidance and consultation is ethical practice. And so if you don't feel like you're receiving the level of supervision that you need to be effective at the work that you're doing, I would strongly encourage you to speak up. And like Tatiana said, if you are shopping around, if you're at that post-graduation mark and you are shopping around, these are great questions to ask. As a matter of fact, when I'm talking to my students that are signing up and shopping around for internship sites, I always encourage them to ask questions like, how often am I going to meet for supervision? How available is my supervisor going to be when I do have these questions? And then of course, alternatively, if your supervisor is Tatiana and she's not going to be available, well, then who can I turn to when she's not available? These are all very important questions to ask. Don't do yourself the disservice of only looking at supervision for somebody to sign off on your hours. This is part of a strong contribution to your professional development. And it's also strong ethical practice to seek out guidance and consultation when you feel that you need it.
Absolutely. All right. So unfortunately, we are out of time tonight. You guys had asked a lot of great questions, and I'm sorry you couldn't get into all of them. But I did include our email address, careers@nypcc.org. You can feel free to send your questions over there. We can connect you with one of our panelists from today. And also, if you are interested in joining our team and being a part of the NYPCC family, feel free again to just shoot your resume over to careers@nypcc.org. If you're interested in scheduling a clinic tour and speaking with one of our experienced clinicians as well, again, you can reach out to us at careers@nypcc.org. We are going to be opening up that option for anyone interested in joining our team. So again, I do want to thank you all so much for your time this evening. Thank you to our panelists, our moderator, for your hard work and efforts towards this event. And yes, everyone stay tuned for the next roundtable topic. Great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Have a
Thank
great night.
you.
Night. Good
Good
night.
night.
Have a great night, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
That's it. We're good.
How do you go so fast?
It's done. Wait,
That was perfect.